Okay, now we are going to see the history of Western Sahara. The history of Western Sahara all started like most of the African countries. It's in the Berlin Congress, 1882, when the big powers divided this Africa into small parts or colonies, whatever you want to call it. The first presence of Spanish colonization in Western Sahara, it was in the south, in the actual city of Dakhla, previous called Villa Cisneros in Spanish. It was in 1884. The first man came there. It was a man called Emilio Bonelli, sent by the Madrid government in that time. And they built a small military post, but it was not exactly the real colonization in that time. But in 1934, it's when the complete presence of the Spanish colonizations and the control of the all Western Sahara by the Spanish. 1967, that was the first signs of the independent movement in Western Sahara, led by a man called Basiri. I don't know if you can see the picture here. Can you see him? That's Basiri. This is the first leader, the first movement in Western Sahara. He in that time he started meeting all the people from Western Sahara, trying to create a new movement. On 17th June 1970, that was the first peaceful protest against the Spanish colonialism, which the Spanish army respond with live bullets against this protest, and they killed 7 people and 100 people were wounded. And the man I show you on the photo, Basiri, rest in peace. Well, we never knew about him, just disappeared. Till now, there is no, we don't know exactly what's happened with him. That's 17 June 1970. Well, in 1973, that was the Polisario found. Polisario means in Spanish Polisario. It's a movement, a popular movement for the liberation of Sagi al-Hamra, which is the half north part of Western Sahara, and Rio de Oro, or Golden River, which is the south of Western Sahara. It was founded by El Wali Mustafa. This is the leader of, founder and leader of the Polisario Front, El Wali Mustafa. 1973, 10 May 1973. Afterwards, after 10 days, on 20th May 1973, that was the first military operation against the Spanish presence in that time. There were 12 men with maybe 2 or 3 weapons. That's what they had. And they start this military operation. And since then, start the war till 1991. In 1975, well, as we've seen in the video, the Green March, the Green March was in December. And in 1975, Franco, in that time, was the president of Spain. He was ill, really ill. He was about dying. And the government, led by Arias Navarro, the government of the Arias Navarro, they decided to do on 14th November 1975 the Madrid Accord, which are illegal, and were not accepted and still not accepted by the United Nations in that time, in which consists it's to divide. Spain is going to withdraw, and afterwards Western Sahara is going to be divided between south is going to be for Mauritania and north is going to be for Morocco. Since that time, till 1975, when the last soldier of Spanish army, they left the country, which is 26 February 1976. The next day, 27th February 1976, it was the proclamation of the Sahrawi Arab Republic in that time. And on 9th June, which is we commemorate as the Day of the Martyrs, it was when El Wali Mustafa, the leader and the founder of the Polisario Front, he passed away in that time. He was coming back from a military operation against the capital of Mauritania, called Nouakchott. And afterwards, since 1975 till 1991, it was war, and it was a big, really big battles in every part of Western Sahara, included the south of Morocco, like Aka, Tantan, Hamid al-Ghazlan. All this is Zak, all this, it's part of south of Morocco. Till 1991, Hassan II, who was the previous king, he could not continue, he could not keep on with the war due to the situation in the planet in that time, situation like Iraq war and the United States who supported and Saudi Arabia, they were busy with the Iraq war. So he suggested a ceasefire. In 1991 was accepted, a ceasefire, expecting a referendum after 1 year maximum, but that's never happened till 13 November last year, 2020, that when was a peaceful demonstration on the south in the buffer. They call it. It's a buffer. It's between Western Sahara and Mauritania. When they the Moroccan, they make a lot of business, illegal business. You know, all the fish, a lot of vegetables, fruits coming from Western Sahara and so on. They took it to Africa, Spain, and so on, and all Europe. That's when this Moroccan army broke this peaceful demonstration, in a brutal way. And since 13 November 2020, the ceasefire was broken, officially broken, and the Polisarios since that time till now, There is every single day a military operation, above all concentrated against the wall who divide Western Sahara. I think Sinia could talk about the wall afterwards and explain what's exactly what means the wall. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very good. And so
yes,
now I'd like to call on Senya to speak, and I think I should be able to actually let her share the. Yes, she can share her presentation. There you go. If you want to start, Senya.
Great. Good evening, everyone. And once again, thank you so much for having me with you today. And thank you for taking the time to talk about an issue that clearly not so many people are talking about, but it's happening in the backyard of Europe, but more importantly, it is considered Africa's last colony. Laghdaf has already talked to you about the a bit of historical context. What I would share with you is, again, briefly, sort of talking about what the occupation means in Western Sahara. Why is it Africa's last colony? Who is financing the occupation? What are the implications of the occupation on us as Sahrawis? And what we hope you will take away from this presentation are few takeaway messages and ways that you would help spread the message and share our story. So my first slide is this: two maps of Africa. Africa in 1945, and you can see the majority is red, and that's essentially Africa being under the yoke of colonialism, under the colonial power and division of between France and Britain and Spain in our case. And in 2021, you can guess where the last remaining dot, which is my country, Western Sahara. And so again, as was already mentioned both by Laghdaf and in the video, Western Sahara is a colony, a territory that has yet to enjoy the liberty and the freedom and the independence that all our brothers and sisters in the rest of the continent have enjoyed for over 50 years now. And why Morocco and Mauritania, which doubly invaded Western Sahara in 1975, do not have any grounds to the sovereignty or the right to annex and occupy Western Sahara. They actually submitted a request officially presenting those claims to the International Court of Justice. And on the 16th of October, the Court of Justice clearly said that the court has not found legal ties of such nature as might affect the application of Resolution 1514, which was mentioned in the video, which is on in the decolonization of Western Sahara, in particular of the principle of self-determination through the free and genuine expression of the will of the peoples of the territory. Meaning, Morocco, you have no place in Western Sahara. Mauritania, you have no place in Western Sahara. Only the people of the territory, the indigenous population, the Sahrawi people who have the right to decide the fate of their country through a genuine expression of their will, which is through a referendum on independence, where we would choose to be an independent state or be integrated into the colonial power. Unfortunately, we are one of the countries that still remain today in that list of non-self-governing territories, or known as the last colonies in the world. There are 17 of them, and the biggest is Western Sahara and is located in Africa. So imagine right now we're talking in the 21st century, in 2021, and we're still talking about a colony. We're talking about an illegal military occupation of country to their neighbor. And that's happening right now in Western Sahara. So with the occupation and the brutal occupation of Morocco of Western Sahara. The reality today is that we are a divided country physically, but more importantly, a divided people. And as Dagdaf mentioned earlier, Western Sahara is physically divided by a long military wall, which is this blue line that you see going from north to south, separating Western Sahara into the occupied territories under the occupation of Morocco and the liberated territories where the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic is headquartered, and where right now, since the resumption of armed struggle and the war between the Kingdom of Morocco and the Polisario Front, our liberation movement, have been engaging in active fighting constantly every day. So let me just show you how the wall actually looks like from above. It's a long stretching wall that's about 2,700 kilometers long. It's considered the longest military wall still present in the world today. And this wall is fortified with landmines. Landmine Action estimates that there are between 7 and 9 million landmines in Western Sahara. And you can imagine the magnitude of such a vast area that's heavily contaminated with landmines, claiming the lives of people, disabling people, but also claiming the lives of animals and changing the topography of the area completely, because the wall actually divides in some areas the rivers and the flow of water, and this has devastating effects on the nature and the natural habitat of our country. And so the occupation is not only about the military presence of Moroccans in our country, but it also has impact on the long effects of our environment and habitat. So as I said, we're also divided people. Half of us live under occupation in the occupied territories, and half of us, like myself, we live in refugee camps in southwest Algeria, and I will talk about that a little bit later. But let me start by the hard realities in the occupied territories. Today, the Sahrawis living in the occupied territories are a minority in their own country. Western Sahara is considered one of the least free areas in the globe today. Sahrawis are intimidated, harassed, tortured, imprisoned, disappearing on daily basis. If you are an indigenous Sahrawi and you try to publicly express your opinion to request for independence and the right to self-determination and call for the end of Morocco's occupation, be sure that that will be the end of you, essentially. But that hasn't stopped the people from uprising. That hasn't stopped the Sahrawis from defending their right to independence and freedom. And when they do that, we're talking about, we're very small people, perhaps 250,000, 250,000, 300,000 Sahrawis in the occupied territories, and Morocco is a much bigger country with nearly 40 million people. So what Morocco did is importing a lot of settlers into the occupied territories, and you will, from what I'm telling you, you will draw a lot of parallels to another occupation elsewhere, which is the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories. So similar tactics, so similar tools of oppression and suppression of indigenous people by an occupying regime. These are some pictures of the capital city, El Ayoun, when Sahrawis try to peacefully demonstrate. Let that sink in. This picture is an old picture from 2007. On the top left is Sultana Khaya, a prominent Sahrawi activist. In 2007, she was protesting in Marrakesh with students, and the Moroccan police beat her so severely that they took out literally her eye. Now, the picture on the bottom right is a picture from a few weeks ago. She, after the resumption of armed struggle, she returned from Spain, where she usually goes to receive treatment because of the long health consequences due to her torture and beating in demonstrations. She came home and she has been under house arrest, besieged by Moroccans for now almost 90 days, 3 months. She cannot leave her house. She attempted to leave her house twice, and this is what happened. I will show you a video shortly about what happened about 2-3 days ago. Again, this is an image of the streets in the occupied territories. Sahrawis being beaten. So the video that I'm about to show you is a bit graphic, but again, this is the realities that Sahrawis have to endure. And unfortunately, Western Sahara and the occupied territories, no journalists are allowed. No human rights observers have been allowed for many years. Although prominent human rights organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, even the UN Human Rights Council have documented and acknowledged serious human rights violations being committed by the Moroccan authorities. Yet the territory is under complete media blockade. You cannot really see the realities, and if you attempt to go and visit the territory, you will be expelled. There are few very brave Sahrawis who risk their safety, they risk their life to capture moments where the Moroccan occupying security apparatus intimidate and harass and torture Sahrawis. And one of those groups is called Nushata, or activists. It's a group of Sahrawi journalists and media activists who try to take videos with their phones or cameras and send it to organizations to use. This video is taken from over the weekend and from 2 days ago, where Sultana Khaya and her family were again beaten. Her sister lost her teeth. Sultana Khaya almost lost her other eye. Now, the apologies if this was a bit graphic for some people. However, I think it's really important to highlight specifically those instances where And there are so many hundreds other times when it's not captured on camera and still happens in the occupied territories. Now that Western Sahara is officially a war zone, there is an active war. It's more important now than ever that International Committee of Red Cross comes and investigates those serious violations committed by Moroccans under the Geneva Convention. But unfortunately, we know that it will never happen. A group of Sahrawi human rights defenders have launched a call to that effect, and I can share the link to their letter after the presentation in the chat, so you can look at it. This statement is from Frontline Defenders from yesterday, specifically talking about those incidences of harassments and intimidations against human rights activists and defenders in the occupied territories. And imagine all of this is happening while Western Sahara has a UN peacekeeping mission, which has no mandate whatsoever to even report or observe the human rights situation in the occupied territories. And what's worse is this mission's primary mandate was to organize a referendum on self-determination in the early 90s, and to date that has not happened. So they're really just using millions of dollars a year without really ever implementing their duty. And you wonder, now that there is a war, there is no ceasefire to monitor, what's their role in the territory? You would wonder, how is Morocco able to maintain this occupation? And the reality is it does so with the help of a lot of Western, specifically European countries. And I think Mark would be much more knowledgeable to talk about this a bit later, but let me just touch upon it quickly. Western Sahara, we have this curse of the natural resources because we're very rich territory in phosphates, some of the best phosphate reserves in the world, some of the best fishing grounds in the world. And since the early 2000s, there have been explorations for oil, both onshore and offshore. The problem with that is that Western Sahara, as I said earlier, is a non-self-governing territory. It's a colony, so Morocco does not have the right to our natural resources. And even so, the foreign companies certainly do not have the right. And that was acknowledged by the legal opinion from the United Nations Legal Council of 2002, which was requested by the Security Council. And he stated clearly that no company, Morocco does not, but certainly no company should be exploring or exploiting the natural resources without the consent of the Sahrawi people. And you cannot really ask the consent of people that are being oppressed and others who are living in refugee camps with and surviving on the aid. Then this was also similarly confirmed by the legal opinion of the African Union in 2015, and between 2016 and 2018, the European Court of Justice has repeatedly ruled in favor of the Sahrawis, saying that the European Union should not have any agreement that would include the waters or products or areas in the occupied territories. Unfortunately, with the law clearly on our side, there is no shadow of doubt that it's illegal to be engaged in those activities, yet so many companies continue to support Morocco and engage in the illegal activities of exploiting and plundering and stealing our natural resources. These are finite resources that are ours and no one else should be taking on and benefiting on our behalf. But what is even worse, these companies claim that they have a social corporate responsibility, they have a code of ethics, but they are engaged in a military, brutal occupation that's actively oppressing and suppressing innocent civilians and preventing them from their fundamental rights. now they also move to renewable resources, like Siemens has windmills, and also there are other companies are building solar farms in the occupied territories. So really, because it's such a rich territory, Morocco is benefiting from both the natural resources in terms of phosphate minerals and such, but also even our own wind and sun are being stolen while we wait for something that is clearly not happening anytime soon. The Sahrawis have spoken repeatedly, demonstrated to say, you do not belong there, to companies, get out. But groups like Western Sahara Resource Watch and recently campaigns by Sahrawis have been trying very hard to lobby companies that have been illegally active in the occupied territories. They have succeeded to encourage many of them to leave the territory, but some continue to do so illegally. And one of them, which is relevant to many of you in Ireland, is Saint Leon. And perhaps I'll leave that to Mark to talk a little bit about the actions that have been taken. But yeah, there is an Irish company that has been involved and continues to be involved in the occupied territories of Western Sahara, and I think it's unacceptable. And the Irish people have a right to know that there is a company in their own country that is involved in an illegal occupation and the oppression of civilians in Northwest Africa. So, like I said earlier, one of the nearly 200,000 refugees who've been living in Southwest Algeria. This is where we live. Mostly desert, one of the most uninhabitable areas probably in the globe. Harsh conditions, extremely hot sandstorms. The temperatures in the summer can go up to over 50 degrees Celsius, in the winter even below zero. We're completely dependent on humanitarian aid for our basic necessities. We get food rations on monthly basis from humanitarian aid organizations, both through UNHCR and other specific organizations. But the irony of that is, while our country is rich in fish and other minerals, we are dependent on canned sardine that's donated by a Swedish organization. Tell me in what sense that is justice or even remotely fair. Water is very scarce. We get water in tanks that come from a few kilometers away. When I was growing up, our water used to be extremely salty because of a salt lake that's nearby the well. But over the last 10, 15 years, UNHCR has done a desalination program. So at least it's a little bit more palatable and you can swallow it a little bit easier. Despite all of that, I think it's not all gloom and doom. What we have managed to be successful in the refugee camps is that we are a very special and unique situation in the sense that we have tried to educate our population. We try to build a society that's based on institutions and a society that's ready on the go the minute that our country is independent, that that is able to implement, have hospitals, have basic infrastructure. So we have doctors and teachers and well-trained people from across fields. So what do we want? I think it's very simple. We want to decide what our country's fate should be. We want to exercise our basic and fundamental rights to decide. And we want to be independent like our neighboring countries have enjoyed for so many years. We want this to be officially the reality of Africa. All 55 member states fully independent, equally independent and sovereign over their full land. Right now, only half, not even half, 20% of our country is free and liberated. We want the 100% of Sahrawi Republic, Western Sahara, fully independent like the rest of Africa. And I think we owe it to the world that that is seen and done as soon as possible. And it cannot continue we cannot continue to be in limbo like we've been for over 30 years. And I think that's exactly why the war started on the 13th of November of 2020. People cannot take it anymore. The patience has run out. The international community has not listened to our non-violent way of struggle, and it was time that we defend ourselves and take up arms. So you've heard a lot. It's a lot to process. I understand. It's a complex yet easy, I think, situation to grasp. You might ask, how can you help? How can you help me and my little siblings who are in the camps right now? These are some of concrete actions that you can take a picture if that's easier. Start with what is easy for you to do. Just after we finish this webinar, try to talk to 3, 4, 5 people, friends, family, neighbors. Of course, with COVID-19 and the pandemic, that's not always possible to do it in person, but the social media and the internet has made us closer than ever. So everyone has a social media handle. Please use your social media platforms to retweet, tweet, share, and I urge you to at least use the hashtag Western Sahara just so it's a bit more popular. And for about 5, 6 years now, we had this campaign called Referendum Now, which is in the past people would take a picture with, maybe some of you did it, but anyway, so if you could use also the hashtag Referendum Now. You're very lucky in Ireland, in Europe, and in North America, where you have accessibility to your elected public officials, and they are accountable to you. You're the one who chose them. You have the power the same power that you put them in office to take them out of office. So please reach out to your MPs, to your local officials, and ask them what are they doing. Ask them to ask members of government, especially if they're parliamentarians. You can try to write an article, opinion piece in your local newspaper. If that's not doable, reach out to journalists in your network and tell them about the recent resumption of hostilities and war in Western Sahara. There is so much happening in the world, so it tends to get buried in the news and the news cycle. And the right to demonstrate and the right of freedom of expression, despite the lockdowns, is still there. So you can safely stage an organize a demonstration or sit-in with few banners in your municipality or plaza or somewhere that's public, and just let people know that there is an occupation going on, there is a war happening, there are people who are suffering for now 45 years. And finally, just some useful social media handles, some Sahrawi voices, just a shameless plug, my own Twitter handle, Sania BA, and there is Sahrawi Voice, which is a collective of activists from the camps, from the occupied territories. These are some of the 3 top handles that I would suggest. In terms of natural resources, again, Western Sahara Resource Watch is an excellent source, but also there is this new campaign called Western Sahara is Not for Sale. I urge you to look at that and support their manifesto. So take a picture, take a screenshot or something. And again, thank you. I'll leave this for a second so you can, thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I look forward to interacting with you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sani. That was excellent. And did you want to speak next, Jeremy, or?
Yes, I think so, because when you're talking about, when you finish that thing, that presentation, thank you very much for that, Sania, you were talking about things that need to be done. And it would be good, I think, to be aware of some of the things that we have already done in Ireland in the past, and some of our experience here. And by the way, I have to make a point that Ireland is an occupied country. 1/6 of our country is occupied by a foreign army and foreign police, and we have, and that has affected the whole country, so that we don't have the democracy that some people imagine that we have. But still, it is not the same as the direct, in most of the country, it's not the same as the direct colonialism of that's imposed on Western Sahara, and it's very important that we struggle to overcome that. I would also make the comment, and this is a personal one, that all over the world, there is no formerly colonized country that is free. They may be free of colonialism, but they're not free of imperialism. And their ruling classes are manipulated by foreign forces, and that affects the people in those areas. But still, it is a progressive step to put an end to colonialism, and we should cooperate in that. In Ireland, there was a website, a Facebook site that was giving information out. I'm not sure exactly when it started, but I think Mark was involved in that. And Mark called us together, I think, a small group of us, to do some work to promote the cause of Western Sahara. And we became quite active, I think, for a small group. We held a street picket in O'Connell Street, on O'Connell Bridge, and in O'Connell Street, in which we were promoting a sardonic view of the tourism of Morocco. And we called it Sun, Sea and Torture. And we had people stretched out as though they were taking sun, but with plastic bags over their heads, and their hands bound by tape. On that occasion, excuse me, the Moroccan embassy sent some of its thugs around to try and intimidate us, and we nearly came to blows at one point, but they didn't succeed. We had another one where we did a similar thing with plastic bags over our heads and our hands bound, and we did that in front of what used to be the central bank building in Plaza in Dame Street. And on that occasion, the Moroccans came as well, and they unfolded a banner, but I think it was in Arabic. Most people thought that they were part of the demonstration, so they actually, in a way, enhanced it rather than undermined it. And we had another one in another street demonstration with banners in front of Trinity College, which is a big university here in Ireland, but it's also in the middle of the city, which big universities aren't always. And we also had another protest about the fish being stolen, which we went to what was then the EU office in Dublin, and we had a demonstration in front of it, and we had cutouts made of cardboard of fish, and we were parading them around. And then we had a net, which I think Mark actually donated to us, an old salmon net, and we used that to show the illegal stealing of these fish. So we did quite a few things, but oh yes, and we had a very big presentation at the Electric Picnic. The Electric Picnic is, or was, a very popular thing here for young people, with lots of bands playing. People would camp out on the grounds during the day and go to the various events. And we set up a kind of an Arab marquee, and a huge amount of work. And I cannot take credit for it, because it was Neil, one of our activists, who was an artist, who did that and who convinced other artists to help him as well. So we got the thing, the Students' Union in Ireland gave us the framework from the arts building in Thomas Street, and we took that down. We got transport. A friend of Neil's had stitched together a whole canopy of different colors, which we put up. Inside, we had one of our Arab comrades who was dressed in traditional uniform, traditional clothing, and was serving tea in a traditional way. On that occasion, he was visited by O'Higgins. I'm not sure, I don't think he was president of Ireland then, but he was expected to become. So that was quite important for us from publicity, whatever people might think of him as an individual. So it was quite a lot of stuff that we did. We also tried to interact with some of the TDs, that's the name for an MP in Ireland, in the Irish state. And we also obviously posted things on a website. The website didn't get set up, the Facebook site that we had didn't get set up until 2012. And by that time, sadly, we were losing force already because some of our people, a lot of our people were already active in other areas, as I was too. Some of them were, one got sick and stopped work. Her husband stopped working with us too. Mark went away to do some other work. Eventually, even Neil left, and we just didn't have the force to carry on. So after, in 2012, I think we probably finished being an active force on the street until we were called together to get together a meeting in the Teachers Club on 5th of March 2019, when we helped to secure the hall for the event, and Mark and others addressed that meeting. It was a number of experts in different areas on economic, on dealing with economic companies in a way to undermine what they were doing, monitoring their activities. There was another one on human rights through the United Nations. I have to say, I'm not too optimistic about those events, though certainly putting pressure on companies can help to get them to change their activities if they have alternatives somewhere else. And that's what we could have done with San Leon, I think. With other companies, I think they do basically what they want, and they're supported by the big powers around the world. So basically, the best that we can do is to embarrass them. Unfortunately, access to our TDs is dominated by their big party interests, and they're not willing, on the whole, to upset any of the big imperialist powers, especially the United States, which under Trump recognized Morocco's rule over Western Sahara just before he left. So really, we're depending on, if we want to do anything through TDs, we're depending on small left-wing parties who are always in a very small minority. The biggest thing we can do, I think, is to embarrass the companies and to make people aware in the many ways that we can.
Thank you very much, Diarmuid. So I would like to call on Mark now to speak.
Okay, thanks. I'll be brief enough. Yeah, there's a few things that you probably wouldn't be aware of, Diarmuid. We drafted last year. We were trying to organise a visit of President Brahim Ghali to Ireland. Now, we had a number of the ministers over, but our Minister of Foreign Affairs refused a visa for President Ghali. Now, he was not legally allowed to do that. So once COVID has passed, we are going to pursue that visit. we actually have a resolution drafted in the Irish Parliament and ready to be voted on. But we're waiting to launch that resolution until the Sahrawi delegation come back to Ireland to bring greater media attention to the issue, and then we'll try and launch the resolution. The idea of the resolution is that Ireland would be the first country in Europe to recognize the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic as a legitimate state. And our idea being, if that happens, then other European countries will follow. We think that would be a massive political gain and move within Europe if that was successful. I have been pushing a lot of people across the political spectrum, so I'm actually quite optimistic that we may have the support to get that through, but time will tell. I'll just be very brief because I know people want to ask questions and things. Just on San Leon, who Senia was talking about, we have done various campaigns against San Leon over the years, and I also made a television program and brought over San Leon's lawyer from London, who was quite an amusing individual. The way a lot of these companies manage to work, San Leon at the moment claim they are not doing anything in Western Sahara. They technically own licenses at the moment in Western Sahara. A lot of the international companies, they sign their licenses through what's called the ONHYM, which is the organization, the National Organization for Hydrocarbons in Morocco. And by going that way through licenses, they see that as a legitimate legal route. But ONHYM has no legal grasp over the territory of Western Sahara, so therefore it is illegal. So that tends to be the case with a lot of these companies. So just so you know that, I have been working with an international group called GLAN, G-L-A-N, and we are actually just on the verge, or they are just on the verge. I guess I helped them to initiate the case against San Leon. They're just on the verge of taking San Leon to the European courts. So hopefully that might have some success. Time will tell. Just Senia and Lagdaf talked about the occupied territories. I was one of the very few lucky people to be able to get into the occupied territories. I think it's about maybe 9 years ago now. And you know, everything that you say is true, and the experience of being there it's very surreal and very strange. There are presently 120,000 Moroccan troops on the wall as we speak. Within the territories, there's double that in terms of military and police. So it's totally and utterly a police and military state. And like anyone who manages to get in, if you fly in to Laayoune, the capital, you will get turned away immediately. I took an overnight bus from Agadir. It was the only way I got in. I pretended to be a tourist, and I spent 3 days walking and taking photographs of tourist sites. That was how I kind of managed. I was followed all the time. I had a guy sitting outside my hotel room all the time I was there. At the time, I met a number of, in a secret location, on the very last day, a number of the people who have now been imprisoned as part of the Gedima Zik demonstrations. So it was a very amazing experience, and maybe in some ways privileged, because I was one of the lucky ones to actually get in. I was strip searched on the way out, but I had actually taped a little memory card of what I had filmed underneath my private area and they didn't find it, which was good. So I managed to actually get some footage out of there. So yeah, just what I would say, what can you do? What you can do is, yeah, write to as many of our latent politicians as possible. We're also hoping to organize, we actually have agreement from some of our politicians. We're hoping after we can get President Ghali to Ireland, we're hoping to organize a visit to the camps straight after that. And we do have a number of politicians who are expressing an interest in that. Whether they'll come or not, time will tell. Most of them are obviously from the more left-leaning parties. So it would be good for any of you to write to any of our members of parliament, because the more pressure we can get now, when we actually get this visit from the president of Western Sahara to Ireland, then we will get more and more coverage and more attention, hopefully, to get a resolution passed through, which I think is probably one of the most crucial things we can do in trying to push recognition of Western Sahara as a legitimate country. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Diarmuid has his hand up first.
Two questions really. I think they'd be for Lagdaf, but I'm not sure. As I understand it, the United Nations in Sahara had a just a presence. They were supposed to patrol the buffer zone or the zone in front of the occupation troops and the wall. And they hadn't been doing that much, as I understand it. And I understand now that they've been told to leave by Polisario. And the other question is related. At what stage is the armed struggle now? Because I forgot to mention that while we were active back in 2011, the armed struggle wasn't on. So we didn't have that kind of thing to be supporting. It was in abeyance. But the armed struggle is now broken out, and I understand is very active, but we don't hear much about it here. So maybe he could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah. Well, concerning the first question, to be honest, Darwin, United Nations role in Western Sahara, it's useless. It's nothing. 29 years we are accepting a referendum, yeah, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. How many secretary generals of United Nations have been passed since 1991 till now? Nothing. What MINURSO means in French, la mission des Nations Unies, yeah? Mission of United Nations for organizing a referendum in Western Sahara. That's the only United Nations mission who has no right to monitor human rights. That's the only one in the whole planet. In the occupied area, Morocco, blackmail, using a blackmail as usual. A lot of stuff. They have a lot of freedom, nice hotels, a lot of parties, and so on. That's it. That's the job of MINURSO in the occupied area. In the other side, in the Polisario side, they're like what's called that film? I can't remember that. Adventurers. It's like adventure for them. They are just coming as a holidays, as an adventure to tell a story afterwards when they're coming back home. And the second question, what's happened in that area? It was the United Nations were there in the buffer that day on 13 November 2020. They were there but they did nothing. Even when the Moroccan army intervened brutally against the protester there, it was a peaceful protester. They did nothing. That's why the Polisario Front decide this is the end of the ceasefire and starting the war. The second question, you know, in Western Sahara, there is a blackout. Yeah, a lot of things happen in Western Sahara and nothing. For instance, what my fellow Sunia mentioned before about human rights happening now with Sultana Khaya, the activist, and it's a brutal campaign against all the activists. We have now 3 people disappeared. We don't know exactly where they are. And no media have talked about this. Well, I have a video here from Democracy Now, which really we are happy, at least it's one of the few media they have covered this situation in Western Sahara. There are maybe two Spanish, but too late. After 5 days or 6 days of brutality, repression against these activists that Sunia show you the pictures, what's happened with Sultana Khaya. And Mark has been there and he has experienced exactly how the Secret Service they behave with any foreigners or any people who are interested to know the truth, what's happening in Western Sahara. And I think, are you happy with that?
No, Salek, sorry, Lagdaf. I asked you about the armed struggle that's going on.
I told you. Okay. Well, I think I sent you some.
Yeah, but
some of them, some reports. That's every single day.
People on the program.
That's every single day in some different regions. But the most important what's happened since 13 November, it's a military operation inside Moroccan land in the south of Aqqa. That's Moroccan land. But every single day, even the military, the Moroccan militaries, on a nighttime, they cannot sleep on the post. They just spread on the desert because they know they are aiming to them. Every single day in the north, Mahbes, Farsiya, Awsird, in the whole line, as you've seen in the map before, all that wall. In that wall, there are every 10 kilometers, there is a post. And another 10 kilometers, another post. All these posts are bombarded every single day. But the problem is the media. It's a block out. That's the problem. You happy now? Good, man.
Can I just briefly compliment?
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Okay, a couple of things just to sort of complement what Lagdaf has eloquently summarized is the MINURSO, which is, as Lagdaf mentioned, the United Nations mission for referendum in Western Sahara, and its primary mandate, as we all talked about, was to organize the referendum. But since that never happened, they were supposed to monitor the ceasefire. Well, there is no ceasefire right now. So the question is, what are they doing? What are they up to? Why are they spending money to do absolutely nothing in the territory? And no, the Polisario did not expel the MINURSO. They did not ask them to leave. They have not done that. Just an ironic disparity. So the annual budget of MINURSO of about 60 people, I think, is the military personnel, is over $55 million a year. what the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, annually ask for as a budget for us in the refugee camps, over 200,000 people, is 30 million, and they never even get half of it in pledges. So imagine few people are requiring almost double what is asked annually for humanitarian aid in the camps, and that's simply unacceptable. And again, adds to the injustice that's already happening to our people. In terms of the resumption of armed struggle, obviously, no one. Okay, we already had the first war of liberation in the 70s and 80s up to the signing of the ceasefire in 91. Since then, most of my life, we've lived in quote unquote peace, but really is a no peace, no war type of limbo that many of us have experienced. And that has built up this frustration amongst my generation, because we felt that it was unacceptable that we're not defending our country, no one is talking about us, nothing is happening, nothing is moving. Morocco is buying time. That's exactly what Morocco is doing. The UN is helping Morocco to buy time so that our identity is being cleansed in the occupied territories. We've been overpowered by Moroccan settlers. Older generation who have that physical connection to the occupied territories of Western Sahara are dying in the refugee camps. You have people my generation who've never been to occupied Western Sahara. We don't have that physical connection. And what Morocco is hoping is that over time, even Sahrawis themselves will forget somehow, but that will never happen, of course. But the element of time passing is in Morocco's favor, and we cannot allow that to happen. So when the 13th of November 2020 happened, there was immense jubilation. No one should be really happy about war, because we understand the costs. Many of us lost family members. I've never got to see both my grandparents and uncles who were martyrs in the war. My grandmother is completely blind today because she lost her sight when she was fleeing the war. The thought of her never being able to see her country again is very scary. But we were so happy that war has returned, because it means that something is happening. We're reclaiming our right to self-defense. We're reclaiming our right to liberate every millimeter of our land. And that just goes to show how frustrated we were, how angry we were at the silence and the complacency of the international community.
Okay, so I'm just looking for someone who hasn't already spoken, perhaps, to raise their hand first. Okay, actually, so I'll go to Mark in that case.
Sorry. Very quick comment. Yeah, Ireland are actually on the Security Council this year. So that's another very important thing. Our Irish ambassador to the Security Council is Geraldine Byrne-Nason. We have already asked President Higgins to contact them, which he has done, to try and push for a human rights mandate for the MINURSO mission. It's always a very hard one because France every year veto this, but it's worth pushing. So if any of you can, please write to Geraldine Byrne-Nason, who is our representative on the UN Security Council. So that's all. I have to go, but I'd really like to thank Sunny and Lagdaf and Dermot and Liam for organising it. So thanks very much, and we'll hopefully see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you. So I see actually ISR Media has raised their hand if they want to speak, ask their question.
Yeah, hello, you hear me? Yeah. And just have a question there. I just want to thanks very much to the speakers. That was very informative. I was just very interested there in one aspect of the presentation, which was around the involvement of multinational companies within the occupied territories in Western Sahara, and the fact that they're operating illegally and robbing the resources of the people, which of course reminded me very much of the situation in Palestine with Zionism. But I was wondering if you could give maybe an idea. I know you mentioned one in particular, which is an Irish-linked company, but would you be able to give us an idea of some of the other multinationals that are operating there? Or is there a list anywhere available that we could look into it further? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There are so many companies, both directly and indirectly involved. Many are, most of them are unfortunately European companies. Even the European Union itself is directly involved with Morocco, even though the European Court of Justice has ruled that it was illegal. I will share in the chat the link to Western Sahara Resource Watch, the organization that Mark works for, and they do research and compile the list of companies that are involved in occupied territories and in which areas, which are three. There are mainly three areas. One is the phosphates, the fisheries, and nowadays the renewable energy sector, mainly windmills and solar energy. So some other examples. So Siemens now is one of the biggest companies involved in the renewable energy sector. So Total has been involved for many years, which is a French company. There were a lot of Norwegian companies that were involved in the phosphate sector, and the Western Sahara Resource Watch group has managed to ask them to pull out. So that's a very encouraging example in terms of that it is doable to get these multinational companies to there are right now two major companies, New Zealanders, what are they called, from New Zealand, actively involved in the phosphate industry. I will share the link to those two companies. Again, all of those companies say that they're not doing anything wrong, even though it's clearly against the international law. And I'm glad that you mentioned the similarities with what the Zionist state is doing in the occupied territories. And Ireland is one of the few countries that forces companies to label products originating from the occupied territories of Palestine. And I think maybe concretely that could be an action that's could be pursued in Ireland, to at least start with pushing companies to specifically label products that are originating from the occupied territories. Then at least the consumer has, of course, ultimately we don't want them to be there until Western Sahara is independent, but as a first step that people can get the choice to be aware of where this product is originating from. I don't know if that suffices for now.
Okay, is there anyone else for questions? So I'll take Martin and then Quivin. So Martin, what's your question?
Can you hear me? Yeah, just I think it was back to, I think it was Mark's point about the 26 counties representation on the United Nations Security Council this year. I'm just wondering, do the Western Saharan people, from what it sounds like to me, is they're currently engaged in a national liberation struggle against the Moroccan occupation on the Polisario front. I'm just wondering, is that do the Western Sahara people, do they want intervention from the United Nations, or did they believe that the United Nations will just take the side of the imperialist powers as they've always done?
Does someone want to answer?
Yeah, I'll do it. So okay, Sneha, yeah, right. Well, Martin, we gave we people from Western Sahara, we gave a chance for peace for more than 29 years. The referendum in Western Sahara is supposed to be in 1992. Since 1992, it was no peace, no war, nothing, you know. And Morocco, in that time, it's more than 1992 till 2021. So it's plundering, it's robbing our resources, it's brutally repression in an occupied area of Western Sahara. And since the 13th November, when the army did what he had, what's happened exactly in the buffer of Western Sahara and the border between Western Sahara and Mauritania against that peaceful protesters, because they seen that that's buffer, it's used by Morocco to plunder and to rob all resources of Western Sahara. They made that protest and brutally repressed by Moroccan army. And that was the end. That was the end of ceasefire. Now, war is on and diplomacy at the same time. That's it.
Okay, did someone else want to come in on that question? Diarmuid?
As I understand it, what we would be asking the Irish representative, the Irish state representative, which correctly Martin said 26 counties, in the Security Council, and it must be remembered the Security Council is really only 5 members, and it's those permanent members, and they're the ones who make the decisions. They can't even vote against themselves. It has to be unanimous decision, which is a very clever way to make sure that the world is run between them. But there are other members who are part of it who are not permanent, and this would be the Irish person on this occasion. I think they serve for a year, but I might be wrong. It might be a little bit more than that. So what I think we should be asking her, as I understand it, is for the United Nations who are already there to have a human rights mission, because that would be, in other words, they would be doing something useful while they're there, instead of being a pretense of something. And if they did have a human rights brief while they were there, they would have to do something to justify it. And they would be feeding back many of the abuses of human rights, which would give more ammunition for people to be raising in the United Nations and outside, because they would have access to those reports. So as I understand it, that's what we should be doing, or that's what the suggestion was with reference to the Security Council. It wasn't that we should ask the United Nations to repeat what they've already been doing.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Dermot. Yeah, that's really good idea. I agree with you. We need to work. We make all our efforts and convince this TD to introduce in the minutes, in the mission of United States in Western Sahara to have right to monitor the situation, the human rights situation in that area, because it's getting worse, and day after day it's getting worse. And in these days, just anyone can check in Democracy Now. It's 2 days ago, maybe 2 days ago, and he can see the report. Or 4 days in Western Sahara, it was made also by Democracy Now. Or in the one we made here from what's that Dermot called in RTE? I can't remember. It's very well known here. The one we made in 2011. It's really give you a good vision what's happened exactly in Western Sahara. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So I believe next up was Quiveen. We've got time for a few more questions.
Thanks, Liam. Just a more basic question, if you don't mind, just to understand the situation there. The demographics of the Sahrawi people, are they Amazigh or Arab or both, like most of North Africa, or are they a different ethnic group?
Someone want to answer?
Okay. I can. Yeah, sure, I'll give it a try.
Go ahead, Sunia, go ahead.
So the ethnic Sahrawis are, yeah, very diverse group of people. Traditionally or historically were nomadic, so hence the free spirit, and we never pay allegiance to a king. I think we have allergies to kings. But in terms of ethnicity, yes, we are mix of Arabs, Berber or Amazigh, and African blood. So we're literally the sort of the link between Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So we're where everyone mingles and meets in that region. So for instance, so I work at the African Union, and one of my colleagues is from Mali, and she said if you come to visit, they will think you're from northern Mali because they speak the same dialect as us, they dress the same, we're ethnically the same group. So the even the dialect we speak, which is called Hassaniya, dialect of Arabic, also has influence of Wolof and some Spanish words nowadays because of Spanish colonialism. Is spoken by a large group that extends all the way to southwest Algeria and northern Mali. So essentially that we're melting pot of all the ethnic group that you could find in the region.
Thank you very much, Shukran.
Okay, so I believe Ruby indicated she wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, it's just a wee question. I'm Ruby from the Revolutionary Communist Group from the Glasgow branch, and I was just wondering if you have any information on Britain's role in the whole Western Sahara. Like, I'm just learning about it all, so I'm trying to figure it out. And obviously, as a communist in Britain, our role is to oppose and talk about British imperialism all over the world, and Britain's got its dirty hands everywhere. So I was just wondering if you have got any direct information on Britain's role, or like British companies or whatever involved in Western Sahara.
Lagdaf, did you want to answer?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I get exactly the answer. Sorry, the question. But Ruby is asking if in Western Sahara it's like a communist or something like that. Isn't it? No. No.
No, I believe she was asking what is Britain's involvement in Western Sahara? How are they exploiting the Sahrawi people?
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, actually, the British government or British position, it's always according to United Nations resolutions. You know, there are some not direct but indirect companies. We have almost now 70 companies who are plundering in Western Sahara, but mostly of them, they are Spanish. There are some of Germany. There are some of Australia, Saudi Arabia, France, a lot of them, Morocco, a lot of them. But from UK, actually, only we have International Power Ltd. But it's a private company, you know. But officially from the UK government, mostly their positions are according to United Nations resolution.
Okay, very good. Is there anyone else who had a question? Actually, so actually, I might have my own question, actually. So when we're talking about the occupation of Morocco, is there a very large Moroccan population currently living in the occupied territories? And what percentage of the overall population in terms of people living there would that be?
Okay. Okay.
Sure, yeah, you can. I'm sure there you can add,
Yeah.
add to. Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, right now the majority of the people living in the occupied territories are settlers. It's almost every single Sahrawi to 4 Moroccans between settlers and the security apparatus that Mark talked about. And unfortunately, Morocco would never publicly state the actual numbers, so no one really knows what are the actual numbers of Moroccan settlers and Moroccan military and security apparatus that are stationed in the occupied territories. But you can imagine it's the same strategy that has been done by all colonial and imperialist regimes in the past. Is they try to wash away the identity and sort of cleanse the ethnic population as much as possible. And that's exactly what Morocco has done over the past 45 years. Is they give incentive to Moroccan settlers, they give them tax breaks, and they're prioritized in employment opportunities in the occupied territories. So even the indigenous Sahrawis there don't get to benefit from the companies, the multinational companies that are actively involved there, because they're marginalized, they're unemployed, and they don't get access to job opportunities like the Moroccan settlers do. Plus, we dress differently from Moroccans. Our traditional dress, especially the women, which I'm wearing right now, is very different. And students, they are not allowed to wear it in schools. And if you speak Hassaniya or dialect, you're clearly labeled automatically public enemy #1. So yeah, long answer to a short question. The majority are Moroccan settlers, and they're overtaking us Sahrawis in numbers in our own land, essentially.
To be more precise in this point, or just I want to add something. It's Western Sahara has four important cities. The capital, which is Laayoune, and the second it's Dakhla in the south. Smara, it's the cultural city, and Bojador in English, Khota, it's G, Bojador. In Laayoune, the people from Western Sahara represent 16%. In Smara, it's about 14. In Bojador, it's 12. And in Dakhla, which is more settlers coming every single year, more and more and more, because it belongs, Dakhla, or before called Villa Cisneros in the time of Spanish colonization. It's in the area of the Golden River. Golden River, that not means it's full of gold, but it's when the Atlantic, the cold of Atlantic water and the warm, it's meeting in that place. It's Tropic of Cancer, and it's full of more than 200 kind of fish and mollusks, crabs, etc., etc., etc. And this kind of settlers, it's the same policy made by the Zionists in Palestine. Actually, most of the things Moroccan regime is doing in Western Sahara, it's copied. It's taken from the Zionist regime. Actually, this my fellow Senia spoke about it. The wall, 2,700 kilometers. It was built by the money of Saudi Arabia and the technician from Israel.
Okay, thank you very much. That's an excellent answer. And Jeremy's had his hand up for a while, so we'll give him a go. You're muted again, Jeremy.
Yeah, I just noticed. No, that's fine. Thanks. Mine's more of a historical question. There was a big struggle in the Maghreb against the Spanish occupation, in which the indigenous people completely defeated the Spanish occupation forces, which I don't know if people know this, but the Spanish had a foreign legion as well, and it still exists, and they go around strutting around with their fascist regalia in the Spanish state, making a big play of how great they are. But they got totally defeated by the indigenous people, wiped them out, chased them right back to, I think, two marginal areas on the coast. And in fact, it was the French who came in there and saved them. Now, as I understand, and I could be wrong, although I think Morocco claims a lot of this victory, there was actually mostly Sahrawi people who did it. That's one thing I would like clarified. And the other is that I also understood that when the Spanish state in 1934, the Popular Front government was elected, I understand that from somewhere in that area, whether it was Sahrawi or Morocco or a combination, they were offered to support the Spanish state, the new Spanish government, if they would be given their independence. And the Popular Front government at that time did not take this up. And subsequently, it was overthrown in a vicious anti-fascist war by a military and fascist uprising against them, in which Moroccan troops were a very large part. So the two questions are, were the Sahrawi involved in that big liberation struggle, which was almost successful, except for the French in history? And also, were they involved in offering the Spanish state assistance if they were recognized for independence?
Well, Dermon, Western Sahara, before the Spanish presence, it was inhabited by 40 tribes. You know, these 40 tribes, they are living. They know each area. Yeah? They have it in different areas. They know that each area it belongs to these people and belongs to that one and that. Like for instance, Connemara, you know, Dublin and so on, different areas. When they detect any intruders, for instance, in 1475, the Portuguese, which were the first people who are starting exploring the area of Africa, they tried to enter by force, but these 40 tribes always, as I told you, when they see that any intruders, they join together and facing this kind of aggressions. Afterwards, they came the English, but the English, they were very, very clever by a very well-known businessman called Mackenzie, who they were Mackenzie. Yeah, he has his well, he was settled down in Gran Canaria, in Las Palmas, but he started doing business, you know, and it's very well known now. Still, that building, it's still there, called Casamar, or the Sea House, where this man make business with all the people of Western Sahara. And even in that time, the government, or English government in that time, they recognized that area as a Western Sahara and not part of Morocco. Signed with the king of Morocco in that time, that the borders finishing in an area called Wad Noun, even more than the one in the map you can see now, a little bit more up. And maybe you mentioned something that's happened in 1956, between 1956 and 1957, which is very well known as, in French, a coubillon, operation. Maybe that's when the Sahrawi fighters start against Spain, and they made a big losses in areas like 25 kilometers from the capital of Laayoune, northwest, a small town called Chera. And they defeated the Spanish. That's when the Spanish called for help, the French, and they made a coalition against the people of Western Sahara. Maybe 1956, 1957. It's you can find it, Google it, just called Ecovillon. I can write it to you in the chat. Ecovillon operation, 1956, between 1956 and 1957.
That's very interesting. I was actually asking about the Rif War, but I didn't know about this other one. That's very interesting too.
So say it again, Dermot.
The Rif War.
No. We never. The people of Western Sahara, they never been involved in that war.
Okay, so we have time for one more question, unfortunately, and I think from Sam Spade. We're approaching the 2-hour mark now. So if Sam Spade wants to ask his question.
Oh, hi there. I was just wondering, for an Irish person, just when you said that that the Sahrawi people are kind of nomadic, for an Irish person to understand this, like, how correct or incorrect would it be to say that the Sahrawi people are something like travelers that we have over here? Like, if you wanted to make to explain the situation to an Irish person, I don't know, like, so the Irish people were colonized themselves, but also they discriminate against travelers as well. Anyway, how correct or incorrect would that be to say? If you understand the question, also, sorry.
Someone wants to answer?
Sunia, go ahead.
Well, I can't claim to know how the lifestyle of Irish travelers, but what I can explain is what I mean by nomadic. So essentially, that lifestyle has massively changed since the occupation. Sahrawis would be going from one place to one place, looking for green pasture for their animals. And so they would essentially be carrying all their belongings over a few camels and going in a family caravan and setting up their tents or wherever in an area to feed their animals, their camels, and so on. So they moved around the area in that sense. So that's what nomadic, what I mean by originally nomadic, that has been completely changed by Spain. Didn't succeed massively to really change the that cultural aspect of our lifestyle, even though they were colonizing us for over 100 years. But Morocco has changed our way of life completely, because we were displaced and we had to live in refugee camps. And even then, now in the camps, people would once or twice a year would go to the liberated territories when it rains in some areas, would take their goats and sheep and pitch a tent somewhere that is green, and then they have fresh milk and fresh products, and they can escape that life of a refugee and breathing the fresh air of their free territories. And it's still the same, something similar. People try to do it in the occupied territories, but usually they're quite scared for their safety if they go further than a certain area. And of course, they're always followed by Moroccan troops and Moroccan security. Even though we try to go to the liberated territories and try to sort of emulate that lifestyle, unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, you have to remember that this is highly contaminated area with landmines. So it continues to be quite dangerous. And even though there is a clearing process of the landmines, it will take many, many years to fully decontaminate it. And the topography shifts with floods, with the sandstorms. So imagine you would clear this patch of area, now in a few months it will again be contaminated by something that moved from another area, and that many people have been injured since the signing of the ceasefire, and many lost their lives because of landmines. Needless to say that animals on a daily basis get exploded into pieces.
Just to add something to this, to fulfill or to complete this question. In 12 October 1975, it's very well known, and we always commemorate this this date as the unity, the national unity. That's when all the people under the flag of the Sahrawi Republic, all people are equal. All people are, they have the same opportunities. All people, it doesn't matter if it's a man or women, they have the right of education and so on. But inside the occupied area by Moroccan regime, that's works different. You know, don't forget that Western Sahara, the population, it's divided by 2,007 kilometers wall, the military wall, you know. And the east part, that's the liberated area by the Polisario Front, the Sahrawi movement. And the other side, and the west one, it's under Moroccan occupation, which you've seen what's happened exactly in that area. If you are Sahrawi living in the occupied area, you are a citizen of third or fourth class. I hope I made it.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're actually approaching the 2-hour mark now. So unfortunately, we don't have the time for more questions. I'd just like to thank all the speakers. It's been really excellent. And before we leave, actually, is there any sites you would recommend following if we wanted to keep track of how the armed struggle is going and you know, keeping up various updates with Western Sahara?
Yeah, there is a lot of places. Mostly of them it's in Spanish, and I'll give the word to Sania because Sania has more in Twitter and so on. I think she wrote that before in the chat. But the most important now in English, we have here in English, it's Western Sahara Campaign UK and Western Sahara Action Ireland. There is Sahara Occidental, but it's in Spanish. If you want to Google it, translate it, Sahara Occidental. There is Sahara Independiente. I think Sania put most of them, put it in the chat before, and that's very interesting. If you go and check on inside the chat, you can find all these things. But in English, the most popular in our area is Western Sahara Action Ireland or Western Sahara Campaign UK.
Yeah, just so I shared the link to Western Sahara News Agency, which is the Sahrawi News Agency. It's the official agency, and it has its website is in English, officially in Arabic, but it's also translated in English, French, Spanish, and I believe Russian. if you're interested. But so there they publish daily the military statement, which is what the Ministry of Defense publishes with all the daily actions and areas that have been targeted by the Sahrawi Liberation Army on that day. And plus Twitter, of course.
Of course. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming and being in the meeting. And thanks to all of our guest speakers again.
Thank you so much.
We really thank you very much for being interested in the situation of our people. It means too much for us. It means really something, big issue, big thing, sorry, for us to have people interested in this situation. And we really need to highlight because it's little known, the situation of Western Sahara in this part of the planet. And just we promise you that we are keeping, we will never surrender. We'll keep on fighting till the end. And if I don't see the independence, my son or my great grandson, like if Ireland spent more than 700 years fighting for the independence, we are just 45 years. That's nothing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, and take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Garamagi Galer, shukran.
Shukran.
Shukran.